Delicious, sign me up. I'm like, I've never met her before. I don't know that she's being weird. When? What? How? What are we talking about? Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Just Sean here to talk about some friggin' books that I read, I think in October. Are these all in October? Yeah. Definitely all in October. This will be the last 6 books that I read in October. I've read a few more since then, but this completes all of the October reading. I read, how many did I say before? I don't remember. Yeah, in October I read 11 books. And I DNF'd 6. Good God. And we're starting off with one of the DNFs. This was also in that Storygraph recommendations vlog that I did recently. Ishtars Blade by Lisa Blackwood. This is a fantasy romance. How far did I get into it? 8%. Not very far at all. My comments here, I'll read the little synopsis, I guess. Warrior, king's confidant, avenging blade of the goddess Ishtar. Iltani asked to be none of these things, yet fate does not ask permission when she weaves souls upon destiny's loom. So, on the day of Iltani's birth, an assassin tried and nearly succeeded in ending the line of the Griffin Kings. Out of that bloodshed, an unbreakable bond was forged between Child King and Goddess-chosen infant. And from that pivotal moment forward, Iltani was never farther from King Ditanu than his shadow. Not until her training to become Ishtar's Blade required her to leave. So she left for 4 years, she came back to the court, taking up her role as the king's shadow. It's a dangerous position, but for the chance to stand at the side of her beloved king, she will endure the dangers of court intrigues, assassins, and political maneuverings. So, yeah, I only got 8% in. I put a little weirded out by the griffin human thing. The main character seemed to be a human woman, and the apparent love interest was a griffin, like with wings and everything. And I can get behind shifter romances, but not when it seems, I don't know, I didn't read the very far, so maybe he changes form. Maybe it is shifter and he just mostly is griffin, but like most of the time he's a griffin and she's like in love with him. And I just was like, this is feeling a little too bestiality-esque for me. But even without that, I don't think I would have continued much further anyway, because the overall tone just wasn't vibing with me. That was the end of that very quickly. Then from this little guy, I tried Frankenstein. And I did finish this one, but I mean, it's Frankenstein, it's a classic, I get it, you know? And this one was partially epistolary as well. Dracula and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde both were completely epistolary and just doesn't really work for me all that well usually. My review for Frankenstein is I don't really have many thoughts currently, other than maybe I just was not in the mood for a classic and I should have waited to try this one out. As I said with Dracula, like I can certainly appreciate the various thematic elements. I can appreciate the merit of Frankenstein and its impact in the literature world and just in the world in general. But my actual experience reading it was pretty meh overall. I ended up giving it 3.25 stars. It's once again just the antiquated writing style. For me, as someone who doesn't read it very often, I'm sure if you read classics frequently, you start to just get in the rhythm with it, and it's not such like a block, but for me, it makes it a slog. It makes it tedious to read, and it just makes it difficult for me to get truly engaged with it and to get any kind of like atmosphere that I'm supposed to be getting from this gothic tale. So kind of a miss, but you know, 3.25 because it's Frankenstein and it's not fully epistolary. So I had a better time with it than the attempt with Dracula. Yeah, I didn't finish Dracula. And the next one was another DNF from that same vlog, The Blood Print by Ausma Zehanat Khan. So this one is, I don't want to read the entire synopsis. I liked the concept. It's high fantasy. In a world, the map for it, it looks like our world of like the Middle East, Northern Africa, like India, like that's what their world like is mapped out like, but it's different places and names and things. And they have like magic and whatever. It very much, the main group of like bad guys are these horribly patriarchal, oppressive men who believe women should sit down, shut up, never leave the house unless a man is around to escort you, cover yourself and from head to toe, don't dare speak in the presence of a man, basically barely exist, and if you do any of these things wrong, will enslave you. And their group name is the Talisman, which sounds an awful lot like something we are familiar with, the Taliban. And there were just so many things that I like reading fantasy. Most books, fantasy books, they're inspired by real life cultures, and that's not a problem. But when it feels just like a copy paste kind of thing, I don't know. It just wasn't. Initially, I was into the world, and then as I kind of started getting more into it, just certain things started popping up that I was like, I don't know necessarily. I stopped at 43%. And yeah, I liked the concept of the world and the concept of the characters, but the execution just wasn't working for me. Also, the way the story was being told. We just got like dropped into the middle of everything with pretty much no explanation for hardly anything. There was this whole council, the Council of Hera, these women who have these magical powers, and the main woman like running shit seemed sketchy. Like when our two main characters, like they get there and oh, there's a council meeting right now. It's our first introduction and we're like told that she's being weird. And I'm like, I've never met her before. I don't know that she's being weird. How do I know that she's being weird? How is she being weird? Tell me how. But instead of doing that, they just kept saying like, she's being strange. Oh, what has changed? And I'm like, no fucking clue. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, so stuff like that just kept, I'm like, I'm not getting invested here because you're not giving me a reason to get invested. So yeah, I kept pushing through, but at 43%, I twas done. So I DNF'd. Then I picked up The Dragon's Legacy by Deborah A. Wolfe, and spoiler alert, I gave this one 3.5. I was kind of between a 3.5 and a 3.75. I was kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes I really loved the writing style. In the beginning, like the very opening like prologue, I was enthralled with, it's like such a poetic, lyrical writing style. I was just like, oh my God, adult fantasy, high fantasy with this kind of like authorial voice that I love, like, delicious, sign me up. But then there were other times where I was like, okay, I get it. You know metaphors and you know similes and you're putting all of them in one paragraph like, or on one page where I'm like, okay, stop. Just like tone it down a little bit maybe. And similar with the plot. Sometimes I loved the plot and the scheming that was going on, the political maneuverings that were going on, the character interactions that were going on. Then, other times, things that seemed pretty important happened off page randomly, and all of a sudden, we're with another character, and they're like, oh, this thing happened to them. When? What? How? What are we talking about? There was one part where a main character, it's multiple POVs, and so there's one main character, or I guess he's kind of a side character, but a more primary secondary character, if that makes any sense. And we see him kicking it in this one place, doing his thing, just like minding his business, living his life. And then we go to a different character's POV and she's like somewhere else. She's further away. She's not in the same like location as him. And then all of a sudden he's there and he's beaten and bloodied and taken prisoner by some randos. And I was like, what the fuck? Huh? And stuff like that would happen, especially in the end, like towards the end, like the last like 20%, this type of thing happened several times. Very jarring. And I just don't think it was executed super well. And I will say too, this book, and once I finished, as I am wont to do, I go look at reviews after I've written my review and just like see like, oh, what are other people thinking? And a lot of people noted this and I agree. It didn't necessarily bother me all that much, but this whole first book does feel like a huge long prologue, I will say. It is a lot. I mean, most first books in a series technically are set up for the series, but usually it's like the first 25% to 50% of that first book feels kind of like, okay, we're building up to stuff. Bam. This whole book kind of felt like that. Again, that aspect didn't necessarily impair my reading experience too much, but I can see that affecting the reading experience negatively for a lot of readers. And same thing with the world building. There were times where I loved the world building. And I was like, oh my God. And I mean, I will say overall, I felt like I could visualize this world really well, the descriptions of it, which makes sense with the writing style. This very descriptive kind of lyrical prose. But then there were other times where there was kind of just no explanation for something. And I was left thinking, huh? What? That doesn't make sense. And there were a couple things that were a little odd. I mean, there's a matriarchal society in here, which is kind of cool. They're like female warriors, and like it's like laughable to think of a man being one of these warriors, because no. And like it's kind of this concept of like men have like the seed that all these women need, and so they must stay home and be protected. I don't know. It's just a reverse way of thinking about it. But they also, in this same society, have the concept of female virginity and revering their virginity. And once they become a full warrior, they get to lose their virginity. Oh my God. And they get to pick who, and the elders have to select and approve of who they want to lose their virginity to and who wants to, and it's like this whole thing. But it was just a little odd to me because of my cultural understanding of, you know, how we see virginity in our world and just the whole purity culture shit. And so it was weird to me to have this like very aggressively matriarchal society of warrior women who are like, but my virginity, yay, I get to lose it. It was just a little odd, felt a little weird. And there were no queer people to be seen anywhere, which also was a little bit odd. You know, again, this matriarchal society, female warriors going off and whatever. And I mean, they do revere, and especially because in this world, most cultures, most people, like they're dwindling. The cultures are dwindling. The population is dwindling. So they do kind of really revere, you know, procreation to populate their society, I guess. Maybe that's an explanation for it. There really wasn't too much of an explanation for it though. And there's not even any mention of like anyone feeling those types of feelings, but not being able to act on it because I have to do my duty and procreate. There was nothing like that. There was just no queerness to be seen anywhere. So that was a little bit of a bummer as well. I am continuing with the series because I liked it well enough. And I'm just kind of hoping that the couple of things that didn't work super well for me, that they're improved as it goes on. We shall see. I will be reporting back on that. Then, because I felt like I was maybe getting myself into a little bit of a slumpy situation, doing that story graph recommendations vlog and like DNFing almost all of them. And then even the one I finished feeling like, I don't know. And back to back to back, a bunch of like high fantasy stuff. So I gave myself a little palate cleanser, a little break with Death Beside the Seaside by T.E. Kinsey, the next book in the Lady Hardcastle mystery series. Well, the next one that I had to get to. I'm not caught up. And these are just nice little cozy historical mysteries set in England with Lady Hardcastle and her maid/best friend, Flo. And in this one, Lady Hardcastle and Flo are going on a much-deserved little seaside vacation. But guess what? Hijinks ensue. Dead bodies start showing up, and they have to help solve the mystery. This one was extra fun for me for some reason. I was just so happy to be back with Flo and Lady Hardcastle. I love them so much. And I think I liked this one even more than normal, than the last like couple, I guess, because they got embroiled in all this like government espionage again, which is what they used to do. But recently, in the first handful of books, the mysteries that they're solving are much more like local interpersonal skirmishes and things versus this like actual huge government espionage conspiracy stuff. Just such a delight, such a fun time. Once again, I tab. Yeah, just so many times where they're so funny. Just these little like asides. Lady Hardcastle and Flo are talking, and Flo says, "So much for our fabled espionage skills. We'd be dead and stuffed in the kitchen bins by now if we were on a job. You would, perhaps. I see myself as being the sort of girl to be bundled up in an exquisite Persian rug and dumped in the Caspian Sea at dead of night." And then Flo says, "There's a class struggle even in death, but that doesn't disguise the fact that we allowed an old geezer in a white tunic to sneak up on us, blah, blah, blah." But just like those little asides of like, there's a class struggle even in death. Like, it's just so silly. Stupid crap too, like this. Lady Hardcastle and Flo again. Well now, she said, my Russian is a little rusty. I told you, you need to pat him dry with a towel and then thoroughly oil him before you put him away. It's no wonder he gets rusty. It's such a faff, though. One has servants to take care of that. But shush, I'm being a genius. What? Just stupid, but so funny. Also, there's two side characters in this, Ribble and Kibble, and I was dying. They kept reminding me of the guy as Emilio from Mr. Deeds, when he's like, you underestimated my sneakiness, sir. They're just like always like appearing out of nowhere. They're always like, oh God. Oh, I was dying. So yeah, 4.25 stars for this one. So great, so much fun. Probably honestly like a 4.5. Yeah, look at me, once again, as per usual, changing my ratings on the fly. 4.5 stars for Death Beside the Seaside. Next, I actually read a NetGalley e-arc that I had, Harlem Rap City by Victoria Christopher Murray. I'll read the description for this one. In 1919, a high school teacher from Washington, D.C. arrives in Harlem, excited to realize her lifelong dream. Jessie Redmond Fawcett has been named the literary editor of The Crisis, the first Black woman to hold this position at a preeminent African-American magazine. Jessie is poised to achieve literary greatness, but she holds a secret that jeopardizes it all. W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of The Crisis, is not only Jessie's boss, he's her lover. And neither his wife nor their 14-year age difference can keep the two apart. Amidst rumors of their tumultuous affair, Jessie is determined to prove herself. She attacks the challenge of discovering young writers with fervor, finding 16-year-old County Cullen, 17-year-old Langston Hughes, and Nella Larson, who becomes one of her best friends. Under Jessie's leadership, The Crisis thrives. Every African-American writer in the country wants their work published there. So this one was difficult for me because I read it very, very quickly, like in a day, which is unlike me. So it was clearly engaging and like an easy / digestible, just engaging read. And I mean, this is historical fiction. Jessie existed in history. She's a real person. So there's a lot of historical fact in this as well. And I mean, I was engrossed with learning about her and her accomplishments and her crazy influence during like the Harlem Renaissance. My God, all these majorly influential writers, and seeing how she nurtured their creativity and just helped them along in their careers initially. However, at the same time, while I do understand that the affair between her and W.E.B. Du Bois was a big part of her life and was obviously weaved into her professional life as well, it was kind of like the point of the book. And I just don't know how I didn't love that, I guess. I don't know that it needed to be the point of the book. The affair was the focus of the book. And so it ended up reading more like the story of a woman, like the story we were focusing on was the story of a woman grappling with her complicated love life, with a side helping of her historical importance. And I just wish it had been flip-flop. I think that if the affair stuff had mostly, like seeing the affair, if most of that had been off-page or just less frequently mentioned, we were in her head a lot and she just was constantly thinking about it. And I think I would have enjoyed the story more, especially because from the author's note and the historical note, it seems like the bulk of the fiction, there was some like historical, like the timeline that she took liberties with, and she explained that, the author explained that in the end. But I think like the bulk of the fictionalized aspect seemed to be those internal thoughts and like what Jessie might have thought about this whole thing and this experience. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but like I said, I just wish that it wasn't the focus. We don't actually know if Jessie, at least from the historical note and the author's note, it didn't seem like there was any like hard evidence. There were hardly any like letters between these two people. I don't recall there being any mention of like a personal diary or anything like that. So we don't know if Jessie was this obsessive about the affair and thinking about the relationship or not. And honestly, there were times where from her internal thoughts and everything, I felt like I was reading from the perspective of like a 22-year-old woman or a 20-year-old woman, not a woman in her late 30s, early 40s, which she was at the time. And again, I understand that the affair was obviously an integral part of her journey and was deeply tied in with her professional life. So I'm not saying I think we should have like pretended like the affair didn't exist. It existed. And there is, you know, humans are complicated, and I don't think it's a problem to look at a person who was deeply important in history and also look at, you know, some of the flaws they might have had or the less than stellar life choices they might have made. But I just don't think that, for me, I just wish it hadn't been the point of this story in particular. All that being said, once again, even with this, and this is like a pretty big thing for me too, like I don't like following POVs of characters who are like knowingly having affairs with married people, especially. Like I'm just like, nah. So it would usually make me DNF pretty quickly. So all of this to say, even with this, the fact that I kind of ate this book up is pretty telling. I still would recommend it for historical fiction lovers. And she was a fascinating person in history. So definitely made me like curious too to like go learn more about her. I did a little cursory Googling and stuff, and yeah, she was great. So I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.75 stars. So, you know, up there. Not one of my all-time faves or anything, but glad I read it. There we have it. There's the last of the books that I read in October, or DNF'd in October. Let me know if you read any of these, or if you were interested in any of these, or just leave a little emoji if you want to say hi, make your presence known. It's always appreciated. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.